In the quiet rain of Charleston, a devoted mother kisses her little girl goodbye, leaving her in the care of a man who smiles too perfectly. A loyal German shepherd watches with knowing eyes, sensing what no one else yet sees. One push, one fall, one hidden camera. What begins as a simple business trip becomes a race against hidden cruelty. And the unbreakable bond between a child, her dog, and a mother who refuses to lose her again. Some miracles arrive in silence. This one arrives just in time.
What are you doing out there?
Before we begin, tell us
me?
where you're watching from.
To the window.
And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe. Rain fell steady on the old Charleston streets, a soft gray curtain that muffled the world outside the tall windows of the Federal-style house on Meeting Street. Michelle Cole stood in the front hall at 35, a woman shaped by loss and quiet resolve. Her dark brown hair was pulled back simply, a few strands escaping to frame her face. She wore her usual white blouse and black trousers, the light gray blazer hanging open because the house felt too warm with worry. Her blue eyes carried the weariness of 3 years without her first husband, yet they softened every time they rested on her daughter. She had built a life in real estate after the accident that took her husband and left Emma forever changed, and now another 3-month project called her away. The weight of leaving pressed against her ribs like damp air. Emma sat on the bottom step of the wide staircase, 5 years old, small and careful. Light brown curls framed her pale face, and her large blue eyes watched everything with the stillness children learn when the world has already hurt them once. Her left leg, thin beneath the black carbon fiber brace, rested straight out. She wore a soft pink sweater and leggings that made no sound when she moved. In her lap rested the crutch, and beside her lay Shadow, the 7-year-old German shepherd who had once worn the badge of the Charleston Police K-9 unit. His thick tan and black coat rose and fell with slow breaths, amber eyes never far from the child. The small scar beneath his right ear was the only mark time had left on him. He had come home with them after the accident, retired early, and chosen Emma as his charge without ever being asked. Julian appeared at the top of the stairs, 34, tall enough to fill the doorway, his short black hair neatly combed, olive skin smooth under the hall light. He wore a crisp white shirt and dark gray trousers, the tie loosened just enough to look relaxed. His dark brown eyes met Michelle's with the practiced smile he had worn since they met at the office 2 years earlier. He had been kind then, attentive, steady, and she had let herself believe kindness could grow into something safe. Now, watching him descend, she remembered the afternoon she had seen him snap at a stray cat on the sidewalk outside their building, his voice low and sharp, the way a man speaks when no one important is watching. And she remembered the evening he had roughhoused with Emma a little too hard, making the girl cry out once before he laughed it off. Those moments had stayed with her, small shadows, enough to make her quietly install the small camera in the hallway corner weeks ago. She had told herself it was only caution. "Everything ready?" Julian asked, his voice even, almost gentle. Michelle nodded. "Almost." She knelt beside Emma, smoothing the girl's hair. "You remember the rules, sweetheart. Therapy on Mondays and Thursdays. Grace next door has the spare key if you need anything, and Shadow stays close." Emma nodded, fingers curling into the thick fur at Shadow's neck. The dog shifted, pressing his warm side against her leg. Then it happened, quick and small. Emma tried to stand without the crutch, testing the brace the way children test limits. Her good leg buckled for half a second. Before Michelle could reach, Shadow rose in one fluid motion, shoulder against the girl's hip, steadying her until balance returned. Emma laughed softly, a sound like sunlight breaking through clouds. Julian's smile tightened at the corners, but he said, "Good dog," the words flat. Michelle felt something turn inside her chest, gratitude for the animal, unease at the man. She hugged Emma carefully, breathing in the faint scent of baby shampoo and rain. "I'll call every night," she whispered. "Tell me everything, even what Shadow dreams about." Emma looked up, eyes wide. "Promise you'll come back soon?" "I promise, baby." The black sedan waited outside, engine idling. Michelle stood on the porch a moment longer, rain touching her face. Julian held the door open for her, polite as always. She glanced back once at the staircase, at the small figure and the large dog waiting together in the warm light of the hall. Shadow's gaze followed her, steady and knowing. As the car pulled away, tail lights red against the wet street, Emma knelt on the rug. She pressed her forehead to Shadow's broad head, voice barely above a breath. "Don't let him take me away, okay?" The dog exhaled once, warm against her cheek, and did not move. The house on Meeting Street grew quieter after the sedan disappeared into the rain, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Julian moved through the rooms with a new certainty. At 34, he had always kept his shirt pressed and his words measured, but now the mask slipped in small ways. The first morning, he opened the back door and pointed to the porch. "Out," he said to Shadow, voice flat, no room for argument. The German shepherd paused, amber eyes flicking to the staircase where Emma still slept, then stepped outside into the damp chill. Julian shut the door with a soft click that echoed louder than it should have. He turned to the living room shelves next, lifting the framed photographs of Emma's father one by one. Each picture, smiling at the harbor, holding a newborn Emma, laughing in sunlight, he placed carefully into a cardboard box labeled "Storage." The wood of the shelves smelled faintly of lemon polish and old grief. Julian did not look at the images long. He simply cleared space as though erasing the past would make the present simpler. Emma woke to the silence. She limped to the kitchen on her crutch, brace clicking softly against the hardwood. Julian stood at the counter, stirring oatmeal with mechanical strokes. He wore the same white shirt from yesterday, sleeves rolled now, dark trousers still creased. "New rules," he said without turning. "No running, no shouting. Toys stay in your room. Eat neatly." He set the bowl on a small table by the wall, away from his own place at the dining table. Emma nodded, eyes down. She missed the way her mother used to hum while pouring syrup, the way laughter used to fill the air like light through lace curtains. Now the house felt thinner, the air cooler. At night, when the lights dimmed, Julian turned the key in her bedroom door. "For your safety," he called through the wood. "You're unsteady on those crutches." The lock clicked like a promise broken. Emma lay in the dark, listening to the house settle. The only sound that answered was the faint scrape of nails on the porch outside her window. She slipped from bed, balanced on her good leg, and pressed her palm to the cold glass. Shadow sat below, fur damp from mist, head tilted up. His amber eyes caught the faint hallway light and held it steady. Emma whispered through the pane, voice small against the night. "He's like a monster in the stories, Shadow. He took Dad's pictures away." The dog rose on his hind legs, front paws against the sill, and licked the glass, once, twice, warm breath fogging the window. When Julian's footsteps sounded in the hall, Shadow dropped back to all fours and growled low, a rumble deep in his chest. Julian paused outside the door, listening, then muttered, "Kids and their imaginations," before walking on. Emma stayed at the window until the dog settled again, curled tight against the cold brick, watching over her like a quiet vow. The days blurred into routine. Breakfast at exactly 7. No second helpings. No questions. Julian moved through the house like a man measuring every inch of control. Emma learned to fold her clothes the way he liked, to eat without spilling, to keep her voice below a whisper. One afternoon, she sat at the small table, stirring cold oatmeal, when her spoon slipped. Milk splashed across the floor in a pale arc. Julian froze in the doorway. His jaw tightened, eyes narrowing for a heartbeat before he forced a slow breath. "Clean it up," he said, voice calm, too calm. "Carelessness isn't acceptable." Emma crouched, rag in hand, balancing on her good knee. Shadow barked once from the porch, sharp and urgent. Julian glanced toward the glass door, lips thinning, but he said nothing more. The moment passed, yet it lingered in the air like smoke. Emma returned to her room that evening, heart thumping not from pain, but from the quiet that followed every small mistake. She knelt at the window again. Shadow was there, as always, ears pricked. She pressed her forehead to the glass. "I miss Mom," she breathed. The dog whined softly, pawing once at the sill. In that small sound, Emma heard something steady, something that did not change. She closed her eyes and let the warmth of his presence through the cold pane remind her she was not entirely alone. The house held its breath again that night, waiting for what came next. The days in the old house grew heavier, the air inside thick with unspoken things, as though the walls had learned to listen and judge. Julian's patience thinned like worn thread. He spoke less now, but his words carried edges, sharp reminders that Emma was slow, that she needed to try harder. At 34, the man who once smiled easily at the office had let something colder settle behind his dark eyes. He gripped her wrist once when she hesitated over homework, fingers tightening until she winced, then releasing as if nothing had happened. "Don't make me repeat myself," he said, voice low. Emma learned to shrink smaller, to keep her gaze on the floor. She moved through the house like a shadow of herself, the brace on her leg clicking softly against the silence. At night, the locked door became a familiar ache, the key turning like a sigh she could not answer. She whispered to the darkness, remembering her mother's voice on the phone calls that came less often now, the promises that felt farther away with every passing day. One afternoon, the kitchen smelled of oatmeal again, steam rising in faint curls. Emma sat at the small table by the wall, spoon moving carefully. Her hand trembled, just once, and the bowl tipped. Milk and bits of cereal spilled across the floor in a slow, pale pool. Julian stood in the doorway, shoulders rigid. For a long moment he said nothing. Then his voice came, quiet and terrible. "Upstairs, now!" Emma rose slowly, crutch under her arm, heart hammering against her ribs. She climbed one step at a time, the wood creaking under her weight. Julian followed close behind, breath steady. At the landing, her brace caught the edge of a riser. She stumbled, reaching for the banister. His hand shot out, not to steady her, but to push. The motion was small, deliberate. Emma's body folded forward, then tumbled, a soft thud echoing down the stairs until she lay still at the bottom, one arm twisted awkwardly, crutch a few feet away. Outside the kitchen door, Shadow had been pacing since morning. When Julian's voice rose, the dog began to claw at the wood, sharp, insistent scrapes that grew frantic. He barked once, deep and urgent, then clawed again, nails raking the paint. Julian had shoved him farther out earlier, but the sound carried through the house like a warning no one heeded. Now, as Emma lay motionless, the front door opened. Rain still clung to Michelle's coat. She stepped inside, briefcase in hand, the forgotten folder from the project that had brought her back early. Her eyes found her daughter crumpled on the floor, Julian frozen above on the stairs. The world narrowed to that single frozen heartbeat. Shadow burst through the half-open back door, nails scraping hardwood, and rushed to Emma. He pressed his broad head against her chest, whining low, then lifted his gaze to Julian and growled, a sound that filled the foyer like thunder held in check. He licked Emma's cheek once, gentle, as though willing her to breathe. Michelle dropped the briefcase. It hit the floor with a dull thud. She crossed the room in 3 strides, knelt beside her daughter, hands trembling as she touched the small face. "Emma," she whispered. The girl's eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Mommy." The word was thin, barely there. Michelle looked up. Julian stood at the top of the stairs, color draining from his face. "She fell," he said quickly. "I tried to catch her." Michelle did not answer. She rose, walked to the small monitor on the entry table, the one connected to the camera she had installed in secret, the one she had never told him about. She pressed replay. The footage played, Emma on the stairs, Julian behind, the unmistakable motion of his hand. Michelle's breath caught. She turned back to him, eyes steady now, the weariness replaced by something unbreakable. "Don't move," she said, voice low and final. She lifted Emma into her arms, the girl small and warm against her chest. Shadow stayed close, body pressed to her leg, amber eyes never leaving Julian. Michelle reached for the phone, dialed the emergency line, then another number. Grace, the deputy next door. Sirens began in the distance, faint at first, growing nearer. Julian stepped down one stair, hands raised. "You don't understand." Michelle cut him off with a look that needed no words. She held Emma tighter, rocking gently. The child's fingers curled into her mother's blouse. Shadow sat beside them, head resting on Michelle's knee, a quiet guardian in the storm that had finally broken open. In that moment, Michelle understood something she had felt, but never named. Shadow had known all along. The dog's steady gaze, the low growls, the nights he waited on the porch, they had been warnings she had not fully heard. Now the truth lay bare between them, and with it came the beginning of something stronger than fear. The ambulance lights cut through the rain in red and blue pulses, turning the wet streets of Charleston into something almost sacred, a quiet path to shelter. Inside the emergency room, the air smelled of antiseptic and warm blankets. Emma lay small on the white sheet, her left arm in a fresh cast from wrist to elbow, a thin bandage around her head. The mild concussion had left her drowsy, but her breathing was steady now. Michelle sat beside the bed, coat still damp, one hand resting over her daughter's fingers. She had not moved since they arrived. Shadow lay curled at the foot of the bed, thick tan and black coat rising and falling in rhythm with the girl's chest. A nurse had hesitated at first, hospital policy, but one look at the dog's steady amber eyes, the way he refused to leave Emma's side, and she had nodded. "Just tonight," she said softly. Shadow did not stir, only watched, as though guarding something more fragile than bone. Dr. Samantha Green entered quietly, early 50s, silver hair cropped close, blue scrubs wrinkled from a long shift. Her gray eyes carried the calm of someone who had seen too many families broken and mended. She reviewed the chart, then spoke gently. Fractured radius, no displacement, mild concussion, bruising on the ribs but no internal damage. She's lucky. She paused, studying Michelle's face. This wasn't an accident, was it? Michelle shook her head once. The doctor nodded, no judgment, only quiet understanding. The police will need statements. We've noted everything. When Emma stirred, eyes fluttering open, Michelle leaned close. "I'm here, baby." The girl's voice was a whisper. "He pushed me, Mommy." The words landed soft, but they struck like stones in still water. Michelle felt something inside her crack open. Grief for what had been allowed, anger at herself for not seeing sooner, and beneath it all, a fierce, protective certainty. She would never let Julian near her daughter again. Not ever. Deputy Grayson Monroe arrived just after midnight, still in uniform, auburn hair damp from the rain, green eyes steady under the fluorescent light. He had been their neighbor once, before the accident that took Michelle's husband, and the familiarity in his voice carried no pity, only quiet resolve. "We've got him in holding," he said, glancing at the monitor where the hallway camera footage played on a loop. Julian's face appeared on the screen, hand extended, pushed deliberate. Grayson exhaled slowly. He tried to say it was an accident at first, changed the story twice. The footage doesn't lie. Julian had admitted partial fault in the interview room, voice shaking now that the mask was gone. Grayson placed a hand on Michelle's shoulder for a moment. "Restraining orders in process. You won't have to see him unless you choose to." Michelle nodded, throat tight. She looked at Emma, sleeping again, then at Shadow, whose head rested on the mattress edge, eyes half closed, but alert. The dog had known. All those low growls, the nights on the porch, the steady watch, they had been his way of saying what she had not yet heard. Later, when the room quieted and the only sound was the soft beep of the monitor, Michelle drifted into a half-sleep in the chair. In the dream, she stood on the old porch again, rain falling soft. Her husband was there, younger, kneeling beside a younger Shadow, the dog's ears pricked as he learned commands. Sit, stay, protect. The man's hands moved gentle over the thick fur, voice low and sure. "He'll keep them safe when I can't," he said, looking up at her with the same steady eyes she remembered. Shadow in the dream turned, amber gaze meeting hers, and she understood. The dog had carried that promise forward, through the years, through the silence, through the storm. When she woke, the first gray light touched the window. Emma breathed evenly beside her. Shadow lifted his head, met her eyes, and thumped his tail once against the floor, a small, certain rhythm. Michelle reached down, fingers sinking into the warm fur behind his ears. "Thank you," she whispered. The words felt like prayer. In that quiet hour, with her daughter safe and the truth finally spoken, Michelle felt the beginning of forgiveness, not for Julian, but for herself. She had not seen everything in time, but she had come back, and Shadow had never stopped watching. That was enough to hold on to. The hospital discharged Emma on a pale morning when the rain had finally lifted, leaving the Charleston streets clean and quiet under a sky the color of washed slate. Weeks passed in soft rhythms. Emma's cast came off in stages, replaced by a lighter brace she could remove for therapy. She met with Dr. Lewis Marks twice a week, a gruff man in his early 60s, thick gray mustache, tweed jacket over scrubs, voice raspy from years of quiet listening. He sat low in the chair, letting Emma draw while she spoke in small sentences about the stairs, the locked door, the way Shadow had waited outside her window. Michelle watched from the doorway sometimes, heart aching at how the girl's eyes still searched the room for safety. But the drawings changed, fewer shadows, more light on the page. Shadow attended every session, lying at Emma's feet, head on paws, amber eyes, steady. The dog's presence seemed to loosen something in the child. She spoke more freely when his warm side pressed against her leg. Michelle felt the guilt ease a little each time, guilt for not seeing sooner, for trusting too long. She began to forgive herself in fragments, one quiet evening at a time. They left the old house on Meeting Street without ceremony. Michelle packed only what mattered: Emma's drawings, a few clothes, the small wooden box of photographs she had rescued from storage. The Federal-style home stood empty behind them, its blue shutters closed like eyes that had seen too much. They drove south to Folly Beach, the road winding past salt marshes and dunes. The cottage was modest, white with wide windows that let the ocean light pour in. Sand tracked across the porch the first day, and the air smelled of salt and pine. Emma stepped onto the deck on her brace, crutch tapping softly, and laughed when a wave broke far below. Shadow bounded ahead, paws kicking up sand, tail high, running free for the first time in months. He chased gulls, then returned to Emma's side, nudging her hand with his broad head. Michelle watched them from the doorway, the breeze tugging at her dark hair, and felt the weight in her chest lighten, just a fraction. The house on Meeting Street had held silence. This one held sound, the crash of waves, the dog's joyful bark, Emma's small voice calling his name. Caleb O'Donnell appeared one afternoon, toolbox in hand, offering to fix the loose porch rail. 50, broad-shouldered, salt and pepper hair, short under a faded cap, gray beard neatly trimmed, hands calloused from decades of honest work. He wore a navy plaid flannel shirt rolled to the elbows, faded jeans, and worn brown boots. His voice rumbled low, softened by years of carrying grief. "Heard you folks moved in," he said, kneeling to measure the rail. "Place needed some care." While they worked, Caleb spoke quietly of his own loss. His wife gone in a boating accident years back, his daughter pulling away into silence afterward. "Had an old shepherd then," he said, eyes on the wood. "Big fellow, like yours. Sat with her every night when she wouldn't talk. Licked her tears, kept watch. Pulled her back, slow but sure." He looked at Shadow, who lay nearby watching Emma play in the sand. "Your boy's doing the same here. Ever think of certifying him as a therapy dog?" Michelle nodded slowly, the idea settling like a gift she hadn't known she needed. Caleb smiled faintly. They don't ask for much, just to be there. That evening the news came. Julian had accepted a plea deal. Assault, endangerment, time served, no contact ever again. Michelle read the letter on the porch while the sun dipped low, painting the water gold. She folded it carefully, set it aside. Emma drew at the table inside, crayon scratching paper. A lighthouse now, a woman and girl and dog beneath its beam. Michelle took a piece of driftwood she had found on the beach, carved it slowly with a knife. The Lighthouse House. Beneath the words she etched 3 simple silhouettes: mother, daughter, dog. She hung it above the door as the stars came out. Shadow sat beside her on the steps, head against her knee. Emma joined them, leaning into her mother's side. The ocean whispered below, steady and endless. In the quiet that followed, Michelle felt the past loosen its hold. Not gone, but no longer the only story. Here was a new one, small, fragile, but lit from within. She rested her hand on Shadow's warm back and whispered to the night, "We're home now." The first real storm of the season rolled in from the Atlantic without warning, the horizon swallowed by dark clouds that pressed low over the dunes, turning the sea black and restless. Wind began to hum through the tall grass outside the cottage, carrying the sharp scent of salt and ozone. Michelle stood at the wide window, watching the sky churn. The lighthouse house creaked softly, as though remembering older tempests. Emma sat on the couch, sketchbook open on her lap, brace gleaming under the flickering lamp. Shadow paced near the door, ears twitching at every distant rumble of thunder. His thick coat bristled, amber eyes fixed on the gathering dark. Michelle felt the old fear rise, memories of the house on Meeting Street, the locked doors, the silence that had nearly taken everything. She crossed to Emma, knelt, and brushed a curl from the girl's forehead. "We're safe here," she said, more to herself than to her daughter. The words felt true now, tested by time and light. A knock came at the door, sharp against the rising howl. Caleb stood on the porch, drenched, gray beard dripping, navy flannel clinging to his broad frame. "Truck got stuck near the inlet," he said, voice steady despite the wind tearing at his words. "Tide's coming fast." Michelle stepped aside. "Come in." He shook off the rain, boots leaving wet prints on the wood floor. They moved together, boarding windows, checking latches. Shadow braced against the back door when a gust nearly tore it open, body low and strong, growling low as though defying the storm itself. Emma watched from the stairs, small hands gripping the rail, eyes wide but calm. Caleb glanced at her, then at the dog. "He's got heart," he said quietly. Michelle nodded, feeling something settle inside her, the knowledge that they were not alone in this. The cottage held firm, beams groaning but unyielding, while outside the waves crashed louder, closer. By dawn, the wind eased to a sigh. Sunlight broke through thinning clouds, washing the wet world in silver. The yard lay scattered with leaves and driftwood, dunes reshaped, but the house stood. Emma stepped outside first, brace clicking on the porch steps, Shadow at her side. She laughed when the dog shook salt water from his fur, spraying her lightly. Caleb followed, stretching his back. "She held," he said, pride in his voice. "Good bones." Michelle joined them, the air clean and bright after the long night. They walked the beach together, waves receding, leaving ridges of shells and smooth stones. Emma bent to pick one up, turning it in her fingers. "It's like the storm washed everything new," she said softly. Michelle rested a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "That's how life works sometimes, sweetheart. The worst storms leave room for light to come back." Later that week, the case closed quietly. Julian's plea was final. No appeals, no contact. Michelle read the papers on the porch while Emma drew at the table inside. A lighthouse, beaming over the sea. 3 figures beneath it: mother, child, dog, and a tall man with a toolbox standing nearby. Caleb arrived with fresh-caught fish, stayed for dinner. Laughter came easy now, real and unforced. As night fell, Michelle helped Emma light a lantern and set it on the railing. The glass flickered against the breeze. "For Dad," Emma whispered. They watched the small flame hold steady. Shadow sat beside them, head tilted toward the horizon, ears pricked as though listening to something far off. Michelle felt the past loosen further, not erased, but softened, like driftwood smoothed by years of tide. She looked down at her daughter, then at the dog whose steady gaze had carried them through darkness. "We stayed in the light," she said quietly. The words were simple, but they carried everything: the doubt that had once clouded her heart, the guilt she had carried, the promise she had kept by coming home that rainy afternoon. Emma leaned against her. Shadow thumped his tail once against the boards. The lantern glowed brighter, a small steady point against the vast night sea. In that gentle quiet, Michelle knew forgiveness had found its place. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. They had been given a second chance, and they were holding it gently, together. As the lantern glows steady on the porch, remember this. Life's storms come to us all. Loneliness that creeps in with age, the ache of illness, the quiet rooms where echoes of loved ones linger. You may feel forgotten, body weary, heart heavy with years gone by. But like Shadow's unwavering watch, there is still light waiting. You are seen. You are loved. Hold on to small kindnesses, reach out to one another, and let hope be your quiet companion. If this story touched your heart tonight, type Amen below, share it with someone who needs to know they're not alone, and subscribe so we can keep sharing these gentle reminders of grace. May the Lord wrap you in His peace, ease your pain, and fill your days with warmth. You are never truly alone. God bless you, dear friend.